In management matters, the Cyber Innovation Ideation Initiative. Last year, ACT-IAC took suggestions from more than 100 cyber professionals, rooted out key themes, and wrapped them into a detailed report. In December, they submitted that report to the White House. For an update, I'm joined by Dave McClure, Executive Vice Chair of the Industry Advisory Council and Chief Strategist at Veris Group. Dave, we hear time and time again that federal agencies are not following fundamental guidelines for cyber hygiene. Your report offers more evidence to that effect. Quote, much of what is required, expected, or even possible in cybersecurity management is known to cybersecurity professionals, but not fully or properly implemented across the government. Now, you identify addressing cybersecurity fundamentals as challenge number one. Why?
Well, Morris, I think that's the point we learned from the ideation is that a lot of the fundamentals in cyber are the reasons why we have the problems that we do. Simple patching, simple password protection, not taking care of vulnerabilities that are known in software and hardware installations. These still overwhelmingly are the foundational elements behind attacks that are done in government systems. So while it's not necessarily an easy thing to relay the message, part of this is about just doing what we're supposed to do in cyber, and that in of itself will help eliminate a lot of the bad things that are happening.
You also find a speedy response is paramount. Here's another passage from your report. Cyber breaches often go undetected for months. 205 days is a combined industry government average. In some cases, agencies only discover breaches from third parties after the fact. Now, Dave, how can federal agencies reduce the time between breach and response when they can't detect a breach in the first place?
Well, I think one of the things that we learned from our ideation is that one of the best practices any agency, any entity can put in place are looking at tracing data anomalies where buckets of data are moving inside and outside of the agency that just simply don't make sense or that are not pre-authorized. In many cases, and the OPM example is one of them, there should have been some anomaly monitoring where large data set movements going to specific locations unknown could have easily been detected and prevented or stopped with more speed and accuracy. So while we want detection to occur, we also need a whole set of tools in place to make sure that when we see those kinds of instances taking place, that we do something about it quickly.
There are generational challenges in here too, like solving the cyber talent search and building effective security into acquisitions. Some of the solutions you propose can be implemented without Congress, some can't. Any spin-off legislation in the works here?
There is, of course, a Cloud IT Act that's up on the Hill right now for consideration, and a lot of the improvements that have been announced by the White House and the Executive Office of the President are similar to what's in that legislation, even the cyber components of it. We need desperate help in the cyber workforce area, and in the ideation exercise, it was identified as being one of the more pressing areas. We suggested to the White House that one of the ideas about creating a cyber corps where you actually recruit both students and maybe folks from the private sector to come in and spend a certain amount of time in the federal government helping resolve some of our security challenges and taking back with them that rich experience and sort of contribution to the country as a whole. So I think the workforce issue is one that we know requires a great deal of attention and thought on recruitment, development, and retention kinds of procedures.
We've only touched the surface of your report. You delivered it to federal CIO Tony Scott last December. What's the latest?
Well, Tony was very receptive to the report, and the CIO Council was very receptive to the report. As a result, ACT are definitely chewing on two specific recommendation areas. One is in the workforce area, where we're developing through our communities of interest a playbook that could be used by federal agencies for better recruitment, retention, and development practices in the cyber area, and surfacing the sort of the details behind the cyber core suggestion. The second area deals with acquisition. Acquisition in the cyberspace is often out of touch with each other. The acquisition rules, time frames simply don't mesh with the speed and urgency that's required in the cyberspace. So we're spending some time putting together a hallways type of approach, best practices, templates, contract language that could help the federal government. And we've also raised with Tony the idea of doing some research into cyber insurance, whether companies that do business with the government should go through some sort of cyber insurance coverage to ensure that their products and services have been examined from a risk perspective.
Keep up the great work. Dave McClure, Executive Vice Chair of the Industry Advisory Council and Chief Strategist at Veris Group. Thanks again.
Thanks, Morris.